Hey, how's it going? Happy
Very well,
Sunday.
you Steve. Yeah, happy Sunday. Welcome to Call the AD, where the A stands for Arthur and the D stands for Dan. How are we all doing?
Doing well, doing well. It's a
Good.
nice sunny fall day here in Washington, D.C. And today we're going to be talking about Neo Vintage watches and what the heck that means. Dan and I don't even know, so we're going to have a guest on to help us out with that.
Certainly, certainly. So, have you got any watch news your end that we can chat about briefly?
Let's see. I guess we'll start with a wristwatch check. Since
Yeah,
we
let's
since
do
we
that.
are doing Neo Vintage, I did the closest thing I have to a vintage watch, and it's just inspired by. That's my Tudor Black Bay 58. I don't think it fits today's topic entirely, but it's the closest I've got because I'm not really a vintage guy. How about
Yeah,
you?
so being near vintage, I thought I would wear two watches, the Apple Watch and the Submariner. Nowhere near Neo Vintage. I should have wore the Mark 40 today, but yeah, didn't really think about that one.
It's all good. The sub's sort of timeless anyway, so
Yeah,
it
yeah,
fits. It works well enough. So yeah, we're going to talk about Neo Vintage. Have our friend Max DC Watches on to tell us a little bit about what it is, because he's a bit of an enthusiast about these particular types of watches. And then we're going to play a bit of a game where Dan and I try to pick some decent vintage or Neo Vintage watches, but Max really schools us on what he thinks some of the best values are out there right now.
yeah.
So what's new with you? What news-wise? What's going on?
A little bit of news. I cannot believe we did not speak about this last week. So, the Ace List Live. Now, the
Oh
Ace List
yeah.
Live. It was Fred Mandelbaum, I think is how you correctly say his name, and Alon from the Ace List. They did their live show on a Wednesday, and it was absolutely brilliant. It was so good, it lasted for over 2 hours.
Wow.
And you joined in at the end. You
Like,
enjoyed it, didn't you?
yeah. I got like 5 minutes on the tail
Yeah.
end. But so
So
Fred's like primarily a vintage Breitling collector, right?
yeah, I think he mainly Breitlings, but he has an obsession with just chronographs.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know he's got Speedmasters as well. Universal Geneves, he's got those. He's got all sorts of different things. But it was just really interesting, really fascinating, and clearly someone with an absolute obsession, like to another level. So I
So
just thought it was really good, and I really like those shows that Alon does. So
yeah,
definitely
I
worth mention.
I enjoyed it. And Fred's so knowledgeable that he's advised Breitling on some of the recent reeditions, right? That's sort
Yeah,
of what he's known for.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. I spoke to him about the 809 Cosmonaut, which is a watch I would really love. That's the very first ones, the 50s, just kind of flat color dial versions. They only made 500 of them, and I keep looking for one for if it comes up for sale. And no, I think they're so rare. So
It's a good friend watch medicine, as always, consistent.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay, well, and you let's move on to Panerai then. And I
yeah,
know that Rick will be pleased about this.
Yeah, I've been on a bit of a Panerai kick even more than normal recently. Ever since we did that episode on the watches that never were and those ones that are sort of always on our list but never pulling the trigger, I've been looking at the PAM 372, which is sort of like the closest thing you can buy today to some of the originals. But yeah, I'm just ogling that, and in the process went down a whole rabbit hole of articles on this blog for this guy Perez Cope. He was the one that called out Panerai for reposting some fake watches on Instagram, but he's actually really
Breitling
knowledgeable.
don't do that.
Yeah, that was not good. That was not good. Let's be honest. I'm not going to defend them on that one. But Perez Cope is pretty into vintage Panerai and knows the stuff pretty well. And he's written these really long articles on the history of the loom types and all this sort of stuff. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, check out his website. There's a pretty good reads.
That's the link that Alon sent you, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. He's looking out for me.
He is. He is. I was like, I saw that come up, and I was like, and ignore. Just briefly, I had a link sent to me from Amiga. It was a roundup of their novelties for this year. It was just a live stream, a local live stream from the London Regent Street boutique. It was really good. They sent us a hamper as well, full of all sorts of goodies.
Lucky.
Yeah. So that was really good. I got really excited because I thought it was going to be like the stainless steel 3861 Speedy release, but it wasn't.
It wasn't. Oh, not that special, Dan. Nice try.
Cool. Any more news your end?
There was a good Scottish Watches Live, as always, on Friday. Dan and I were not on this week, but the topic was the best movie watches, and really, can anything beat the original Sub and with Sean Connery and James Bond, especially came to mind with his recent passing, of course. But what do you think, Dan? You watched it, I know.
Yeah, it was really good. Really liked it. However, Rick, we're live on a Sunday at this time, not on a Friday. So yeah. Yeah, it was really, really good. One of my favorites, I think my favorite was the Hamilton Murph. I just think it's a really cool watch. However, for me, it's just too big. But aesthetically, I think it looks amazing.
It's cool.
What would have you picked? I know exactly what I would have picked.
Since I knew I wasn't going to be on the show, I didn't think too hard about it.
I didn't think you would.
I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't know.
So I can't remember who it was. I think, it was Sophie that picked the Rolex Submariner from Thunderball.
Okay.
I would have picked either the Top Time or the Nather Timer from Thunderball. So yeah.
Did Bond himself wear those, or was it like some extra in the background and the watch is like this big and you're like, Breitling?
No. Bond wore the Top Time, which was adapted as a Geiger counter. So it had a really like funky cushion case to it, which Breitling never released. It was just modified for the film to make it look like a Geiger counter. And then the Nather Timer was worn by the Avro Vulcan pilot. So
okay, nice. Yeah. Oil Money Watches says, remind us of Dan's garbage pick again. Dan actually wasn't on the show, but and neither was I. But go check it out.
But if I was on the show, I would have come last. So
it's just the rule, right?
It is.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay, so should we get to our main topic then and bring Max on?
Yeah. So I shall add him to the stream right about now. Here he is. Hello, Matt.
Hey guys.
Hey, Max.
How's it going?
It's going. How are you guys doing?
Very, very well.
Good.
Thank you very much. So, Max, who are you? What's your name on Instagram? And how did you get into the hobby?
So I'm Max. I run the DC Watches account on Instagram. It's at d.c.watches. And I got into watches when I was a sophomore in high school because the girl I was dating at the time broke up with me and I needed something to keep me occupied.
and people say this isn't a sad hobby.
Oh, it's the saddest hobby. It's horrible.
So where are you now? Where are you coming to us from?
So I'm coming to you guys from beautiful coastal Connecticut. It's my dad's house. Normally I'm in DC, Van Ness, DC, over by American University.
Cool.
So Max, just to explain to me a little bit more, like how you actually got into the hobby, what your first watch was, and how it kind of like progressed to where you are now. So
I don't remember whose videos they were, but I started watching videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And one of the and you know, you start seeing the Rolexes, the Omegas, and you're like, well, I'm 16 years old and I have $4. So I'd like to enter something a little less pricey. So I must have searched like best entry level watches or something. But my first kind of foray into automatic watches or mechanical watches was the SKX 007. which I still have. And then shortly after that, it was the Orient Mako 1.
So the SKX 007, Stephanie's got one of those, isn't she?
She's got the 013,
1.3, yeah,
which is the slightly smaller one.
Slightly smaller. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you went from that to the Orient, and then what was the kind of next step for you there?
So from the Orient, I took a very strange detour. I went for a 1973 Rolex 1005, two-tone, yellow gold stainless steel. Did not like that watch, did not wear that watch at all. And then actually from there, I bought my first NeoVintage piece. I sold the Rolex, bought a Omega Speedmaster reduced. Didn't love that watch because I don't like the movement in that watch.
Yeah.
But from there,
you don't like the modular movement as well as the sweeping.
So the modular movement isn't what bothers me. It's just that when the chronometer, so when the chronograph hand passes 12, it doesn't the counter register for the minutes doesn't just tick over like it does on the professional. It kind of
terrible
gradually counts.
Throw it in the bin.
It's pretty much garbage. Yeah.
This would have been a good one for our watch pet peeves episode.
It would have.
Weeks ago.
That would have been one of your pet peeves, Max. Definitely.
It definitely is. And then from there, I went and got. I sold that watch, and then with that money, I saved up a little bit more and bought my first kind of like sticking NeoVintage piece. The first NeoVintage piece that's really stuck with me, which is my Omega Seamaster 253180.
That is such a cool watch. And your bezel started to ghost, hasn't it?
Yeah, so the bezel and the dial have faded from the deep kind of royal blue to to kind of a much lighter gray blue. Yeah. I personally really enjoy the way that it looks. I think it gives the watch an interesting character. And it's actually one of the reasons that I think NeoVintage is such a value proposition, is because you get these things that make vintage watches so special. You get this like level of patina that in a Rolex 5513 makes the watch $5,000-$6,000 more valuable. But with NeoVintage, for whatever reason, it literally makes the watch less valuable, which is great for me. I love that. Same kinds of character, paying way less money.
That's probably because of people like me that want a somewhat modern feeling watch to have nothing wrong with it. Yeah. So you're welcome. You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Just leave the garbage ones to me. I love them all.
I will say I do really like your Seamaster because Max and I actually first met in person at a Red Bar event in Washington, D.C. And that was on his wrist. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, this is cool. This guy knows his stuff. Yeah. So what is NeoVintage in your mind?
So
hang on a minute. Arthur, you've skipped ahead. He hasn't got to the end yet of his collection.
Oh, yeah. So
come on, Arthur. Sorry.
From bad host.
So from the 253180, I really wanted an Explorer, and I remember talking to Arthur about at the Red Bar where we met about getting an Explorer, and I was thinking about getting a Black Bay 36 instead of the 14270, which is a NeoVintage Explorer, and I ended up and Arthur kind of said, like, don't buy a watch that's a replacement for what you really want. And I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Definitely.
And so I didn't end up getting the 36. I did end up buying a couple of vintage watches as like placeholders. They all broke. None of them lasted. You can see them on my Instagram if you go back far enough. But from there, the next piece I bought that I kept was when I got my job in DC and graduated college. I bought my Speedmaster, which is what I'm wearing right now. It's a 1994 ST 145002. So I love the Speedmaster. And then from there, in August of this year?
Mr. Arrested Time. He will get there.
I'm there now. Yeah,
Perfect segue.
I think it was in August of this year. you guys bullied me into buying
You mean
14270.
You mean Arthur enabled you?
Yeah,
He,
yeah.
he bullied you into
Kindly
commissioning
advised
me.
a friend to make a decision that would improve his life. That's what I
You
say.
know, you did. You helped me with the Speedmaster too when I was looking for a Speedmaster. But yeah, so in August of this year, I bought 1999 14270 Explorer, Swiss only dial.
Yeah. And how are you getting on with it?
Love it. I wear that watch. That watch competes for wrist time with the Speedmaster, which says a lot because the Speedmaster is my favorite.
So that was my next question. So the Speedmaster is the top, and then it's almost the Explorer that's kind of at the same level.
Yeah, yeah. So the I would say the Explorer is probably a hair lower than the Speedmaster, but the Speedmaster just means a lot because it was like the first watch that I bought with like the money for my first real job.
Did you hear that arrested time? Can you just repeat that again, just for arrested time, Matt?
I will say it till I die, and I hope arrested time hears this. The Speedmaster is my favorite watch, probably of all time too, which is I'm sure that makes Sahaj very angry, but that's okay.
So
Cool.
So I have a question. I mean, you're into vintage watches.
Mhm.
Why aren't you wearing a cardigan and telling us about how you shoot Leica and idolized air-cooled Porsches and Ben Clymer?
I think I kind of skirt right under that bar. It's the NeoVintage excuses all of that stuff.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my stereotypes straight. So I guess that does lead me into what is NeoVintage then?
Educate us because we don't know anything.
I think the simplest way to think of it is just in kind of terms of time frame, because the time frame kind of encapsulates the method of watchmaking that, to me at least, means NeoVintage. So I would say watches made from about 1985 until 2000. So essentially watches that are older than me and younger than both of you.
So I'm NeoVintage is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But I'm on the borderline of being vintage.
Very, very close. We both walk the line. I'm almost modern. You're almost vintage. It's totally okay.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah. So about 1985 until 2000. And to me, that era of watchmaking has the character of vintage watches that I really love. And I think that most watch collectors can at least appreciate, but also has the fortitude of modern watchmaking to where you're not worried about like sweating while you wear the watch.
Yeah.
And that to me is kind of what makes NeoVintage really special. It's just a more durable way of having the same character that the vintage watches have.
And also, I guess, I mean, I'm thinking of Rolex as a prime example here. I guess going back about as far as late 80s is, you're still within the realm of something attainable for most people if they work really hard. But going older than that, the snobbery goes way up and the prices go way up, in my observation.
So that's actually a really good way of thinking it, is just to think of it in terms of Rolex. If you think of it in terms of essentially the span of 5-digit Rolex is pretty much NeoVintage. 4-digit kind of was ending as the, around the 1980s, like especially when you look at the Explorer 1, the 5-digit was kind of the 14270 was kind of born at the beginning of NeoVintage and kind of lasted up through the end of it.
Yeah, that does sort of define that time period. Interestingly, I guess, as we'll get to in a minute, Rolex is not where the value lies in NeoVintage, really. I mean, they're great examples, but yeah.
I think maybe I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe. But particularly Explorers sort of 5 years ago were quite good value for that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would say absolutely. I would say even as recently as like 3 years ago, you could get a good example of a 5-digit Explorer for under $4,000. And that's just not the case anymore. They're almost, I think they're over $6,000 now, which is scary.
This isn't very nice, is it?
It's just me.
That's funny. Let's see. A couple of folks have pointed out in the chat that there are people on in the Scottish Watches live account name, the Scottish Watches account name, and the Scottish Watches podcast account name, and no one knows who's who. So it's like the meme of the Spider-Mans pointing at each other, as someone pointed out. I think it was Ben, actually. Good one, Ben.
So Max, with the kind of neo-vintage and modern pieces, do modern pieces interest you at all, or is it always you fall back to that neo-vintage category?
So I think I'm a little bit of an outlier there in that I don't like any of the modern pieces, and the reason isn't because I don't think that they're really well built or even characteristically similar to the watches that I do enjoy. For me, I don't like the way that they are intended to exist moving forward. Like, they're supposed to look the same always. It's all super luminova. It's all ceramic bezels. It's all, it's stuff that isn't going to age. And I think that's, at least for me, that's kind of a shame. Like, I really like aluminum bezels because aluminum bezels have the capability to age. I really like tritium lume because tritium lume has aged. And so for me, it's the modern pieces don't appeal to me for that reason.
No. And it'd be interesting to look back at some of the modern pieces now in 20 years' time and see which ones have patinaed, because surely there will be some. I know, it's like a lot of them. I mean, are there any watches made with tritium? Is it all super luminova now? It's all.
I think it's largely all super luminova.
Yeah.
One exception I can think of is doesn't Ball watches still use tritium tubes in their dials? That'll be interesting. Interesting.
I think those mostly die.
Yeah, they just decay, don't they? And then they just stop. So will they? I don't think they'll ever have a kind of color change to them as such, will they? They just won't work eventually.
Probably not. I think is there a Christopher Ward that uses radium?
I don't think there could be today. I'm not sure it's allowed. That would be.
But surely, obviously, UV light is very, very powerful. There must be some dials out there that it will change eventually.
You would think so, yeah. I know that Rolex specifically has invested a lot into the lacquer that they use to make it far less susceptible to things like spider dials or tropical dials. I think it's probably not.
We'll just leave that there.
Of course.
Naughty boy. This is a family show.
Yeah, leave it to Sahaj. But I think a lot of watch companies have invested pretty considerable sums of money to ensure that they don't have that kind of aging, because a lot of them see it as damage. Which is why you see, like, when you send these pieces off to go get serviced, they'll have hands replaced, they'll have dials replaced. They'll have the parts that make them neo-vintage replaced, which is, in my opinion, kind of, it to me, it breaks my heart, especially because, like, my Speedmaster has tritium indices, but it has super luminova hands. And I look at that and it makes me so upset to know that I have service hands on my Speedmaster.
Can you sleep at night? I mean, how does this?
No, it really does keep me up at night sometimes. I'll see like a little glow from the watch box where the Speedy is, and I'll be like, oh, why is it so bad?
Arrested Time argues that it is damage. And I guess I'm in that camp in that I think there is some patina that looks beautiful and some that's gone a bit too far. But I think in the neo-vintage range, you see mostly the type of patina it's not so extreme that I would call it damage personally.
Yeah. It's kind of a more measured application of the things that are going to age. Like, you won't see the kind of tritium decay that you would in a watch from the 60s or the 70s even.
Right.
But you'll see discoloration instead.
Right. And you typically don't see like full tropical dials in this time frame.
No, you really don't. And that's probably yet to be seen. I think it would be most interesting to see with Speedmasters from the neo-vintage generation, because if you look just a little bit further back, especially with the Mark IIs, the Speedmaster Mark IIs from the 80s, a lot of those dials have gone tropical. Yeah, I know you hate that case. I like that case a lot.
I love it. I think it's brilliant.
I do too. I think it's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's a really cool design from Omega. But it would be interesting to see if my dial at some point goes tropical, because it is a little grayer than I think a lot of the more modern speedy dials are.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I've got a question here for you, Max. And maybe we'll get into some examples of this, but from Watch Medicine, are NeoVintage Breitlings as disgusting as modern Breitling, or maybe a tinge better because they had some standard?
I would say they're a tinge better. And
should we do what we were talking about? Goodbye. Let's bring him back. Let's
fix this. There we are. Okay, everything is right with the world.
No, I think they are. I think they are a bit better. I think they again preserve some of the characteristics of what makes vintage Breitling really cool, while also eschewing the stuff that makes modern Breitling really objectionable.
And actually, another good one is just Terry's asking or saying it must be getting difficult to obtain parts for these watches. Do you think that's the case for NeoVintage yet, or?
I think it really depends. The good thing about these watches is that they were built in. These aren't limited quantity watches. Like you're not gonna miss like a 36 millimeter Explorer dial from the 1990s. Like those are pretty easy to find. Mm-hmm. Those hands are pretty easy to find. Things that are more difficult to find are going to be the tritium hands, things that were thrown away, and tritium dials too. Things right. that were disposed of because they were damaged are going to be difficult to find. But when it comes to movement parts, bracelet parts, case parts, those are all fairly easy to find, especially when it comes to Omega, because a lot of the Seamasters used modified ETAs, and a lot of Speedmasters. The 861 movement was produced for forever, and the 1861 movement is essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's interesting as well, because I know you've mentioned to it in the past to me about selecting where you take your NeoVintage watch for service.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to take it back to Omega, you would be worried that it would come back with the service hands, with the service dial.
Yep.
And that essentially would ruin that piece for you.
Yeah. So it is, at least to me, important to have confidence in third-party watchmakers that you can take your watches to and say, like, look, I understand it's being serviced, but I would like to keep as much of the original integrity of the watch as possible, instead of replacing the pieces that have like aged out or whatever.
I mean, in my own experience, I sent the Mark 40 back to Omega for its service, and they didn't. I particularly stressed, please do not change a thing, don't polish it, don't do anything, just service the movement and send it back. And they did, and it came back exactly the same. So maybe if you do really, really stress that, but then there is still that worry, isn't there?
Still a chance.
There is, and there's no limit to like the horror stories you can go read on Watch You Seek or on Reddit about like some guy with a red sub who sent it in to get serviced, and it came back with like a new bezel and like a new dial and new hands, and that would kill me.
Yeah.
Interesting anecdote related, not that particular brand, but Karan was just saying, when I worked for Panerai and I took my Tritium Dial submersible for service, the watchmaker told me it isn't radioactive, it's just fragile and they might break it, so they change it as mandatory. So yeah, you do run into those sorts of things, I guess, and you could screw up the value of your watch if you're not careful, as you said.
And tritium especially has a tendency to flake as it decays, which is why with a lot of Rolexes and a lot of other vintage watches with tritium hands, you'll see the actual part where the loom kind of bridges the sides of the hands. They kind of become skeleton hands because so much of the tritium flakes away.
That's crazy. Wow. Well, so as a sort of vintage or neo-vintage enthusiast, do you have any stereotypes of modern watch collectors? Because I'm you're defying stereotypes by not wearing a cardigan and shooting expensive vintage cameras or whatever. But what's the flip side, right? Like,
I think the flip, at least for like the go-to stereotype for like a modern collector, is like the guy that buys a Rolex because it's a Rolex and then sells it because it's a Rolex, or buys something to try to hold on to try to game the value system. Like buying watches more. This is a completely a stereotype that I don't believe in, having known modern collectors that aren't this way. But I think the general stereotype of modern collectors are people that buy watches for jewelry or for show, and not necessarily because they love watches.
Yeah. And Dan and I mostly buy modern watches, and we know people exist like that, and they drive us crazy generally, right?
Yeah. I think we all know a couple of people that do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Arrested time, cough, cough.
Yep.
He's just look. He's even done it here. He's raising his hand. That's me. Yeah.
He's got his BB-58 covered in saran wrap and bubble wrap whenever he leaves the house, just to preserve the value of it for 2 years from now.
I think Arthur would probably be the same to a degree. I think with vintage, it was something I would like to get into, but because it's so, you have to really know your stuff, and the practicality of some of them, and like I like to use my watches. They do get knocked around at work and things like that. It would kind of frighten me to use it like that. So it stops me from even entering it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the sweet spot for NeoVintage, is that you can still kind of bang them around. Yeah.
It's not, there don't seem to be as many pitfalls to avoid. I guess it can only be so bad.
Yeah, and I mean because of how modern a lot of the record keeping was, it is easy to have reference materials to figure out what is and is not correct.
Right. Yeah, it's not like word of mouth from like one guy who knows his stuff, right?
Yeah, whose grandfather used to run the factory or something like that.
Or where you don't even know, like no one knows, is that a service dial or isn't it? And then it's like,
is the blueberry bezel real or isn't it?
Right.
So I've only heard of this in the past. What's your opinion on that, Max? Is it real? Is it not?
Of the blueberry?
Yeah.
I defer to people who have blueberry money to spend. If they think it's real, then it's real, I guess.
Cool. Shall we move on to the game?
Sure. Let's do it.
So we have some picks, don't we? Some personal picks of what we would class as underrated watches. So Arthur, what would be your first pick?
Yeah. So what we're thinking here is like particularly good values. I mean, obviously Rolex from this era, it's not like there's hidden gems anymore, really.
No.
If anything, that Explorer one that you bought, it was sort of like one of the last ones to accelerate a bit more in value. And we're looking for something a little more under the radar than that, or underappreciated. And I think we're going to start with a couple of Max's picks, because him being far more knowledgeable on this, I took a couple shots in the dark, but let's let him educate us. And we've got some predictions already. Can lose. Oh, sorry, 30 minutes fast. Nice one, Watch Medicine. Hey, I don't think I'm going to win this one. I don't think I am, because I don't know what I'm talking about.
I'm hovering over that remove stream button again.
Oh no. Okay, let's let Max go. Let's stop the infighting here. Okay, we're gonna start with your first pick you sent me, Max. Okay, let's have a look. So tell us about this guy.
So this is the 253180. This is the one that I have. I kind of picked this picture because it shows the age that you can get with a 253180. That bezel isn't quite as ghosted as mine is. But it's relatively similar. So Omega made these from 1993, I believe, until like 2005, 2006. And one of the things that I really love about this reference in particular its tie into James Bond is kind of interesting. This was featured in GoldenEye, I believe. originally. It actually was preceded by a quartz, which I believe was the 253181. I have no idea if that's correct. I don't. Quartz references are not my game.
We're not really about accurate reference numbers on this show. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
I have to hold up my end of the bargain that I am about the accurate reference numbers. And so there's a lot of variation with the 253180s, and I think it makes them a really interesting value proposition, including the fact that from 1993 until 1997, I'm not going to say your name because gross, but like it is a great watch. But it from 1993 until 1997 was they had tritium lume, and the tritium lume dials have actually aged really, really well. And then from 1997 until 2006, they used super luminova. Mine is from 1998, I believe, but mine has super luminova, which I think is kind of. I think that this watch in particular illustrates that kind of meshing of the vintage NeoVintage very well. But yeah, so this is kind of a favorite of mine. And when I got it, you could get them pretty much all day for about 1,600. I think now a good example is like 2,000 to 2,500. And they run a really solid movement too. I believe it's the ETA 2892, modified by Omega, and they're all chronometer certified, or they were. But I think it's still a really solid value at about $2,000.
And this one comes with the bow and service papers.
I don't know who Bo is, but hey, it could be fun.
Yeah. So this must be a super luminova, right? Because it's Swiss made on the dial. Is that right? Okay, cool.
I've seen some of the red fade on the second hands on these as well.
Yeah, so I actually don't have any red on my second hand. Right. The end of my second hand is entirely white.
Do you think this might be a service hand then? I'm just curious.
Potentially. Potentially, especially if it does have service papers with it. I know mine was never serviced by Omega. I've had it serviced since I got it, but I don't think mine was ever serviced by Omega. But yeah, it's it was meant to compete with Submariners of a similar era. And especially when you look at the bracelet, like that clasp is entirely milled. It's not pressed metal. It has a diver's extension. Like, subs are always going to cost more money because they're Rolexes, but I think this as a competitor for a similarly aged Submariner is really attractive.
Yeah, that's cool. So you've got a bit of a theme. I think you have a few more Seamasters here as well. I won't spoil it. Let me just get the other one here for you. What have I done with the order of these? Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so this one I think is really cool. This is I kind of maybe cheated. This was announced in 2000, and the release was like over the next couple of years. But so this is the Jerry Lopez GMT 253650. This was a Japan only release. And it's limited to 999 pieces from Omega. And when you talk about things that are like kind of hot right now, limited edition GMT, it's the 41 millimeter Seamaster case. So it's the same case as the 253180, except there's no helium release valve. Updated bracelet, updated clasp. I think the case back is really cool. So the case back has 3 hibiscus flowers around decal of the Hawaiian Islands and Jerry Lopez's signature. Jerry Lopez was a big wave surfer, I think. He was an ambassador for Omega when this came out. But I when you talk about like Rolexes of a similar ilk, like I think this compares really favorably to the 16570, the black dial, which is like over $6,000 now. I think honorable mention too here to the white dial, which isn't NeoVintage. Those came out in 2002.
But they still have that NeoVintage vibe about them, even though they came out at that point.
Yeah, I think so, especially because it's just an updated dial on the original black dial non-LE. which I believe is the 223450, which is the 50th anniversary Seamaster, which was introduced as the 50th anniversary GMT in 1998. Yeah, watch medicine. Yeah,
there you go.
So
he
he
says he owns one of these, so I instantly now don't like it.
I actually do like them. So good on your watch medicine. I like those a lot.
I love the sword hands too. They're really cool.
I do too. I think it's an interesting. There's another Seamaster. I think it might be the 22 something. Or I don't know the reference for that because I don't own it. But it's the black dial wave dial with sword hands, which is I think a cool iteration on the skeleton hands that Omega normally uses on Seamasters.
Cool.
Okay. And you have one more sort of in a trilogy here, right? To share. Let's find that guy for you. Ooh, I think this is it. Forgive me if it's not. There we go. This one's funky.
Yeah, so this is kind of a cool one. This is the Jacques Mayol limited edition Omega Seamaster. I believe the reference is 255341, but maybe it's not. So this is a series of limited editions. This is in a series of limited edition Seamasters that Omega did for Jacques Mayol, who was a record-setting free diver. And he pretty regularly descended depths of like 100 meters as a free diver, which is terrifying.
Yeah. That's
so these were made in 1996. It's a limited run of 3,000. It's the 36 millimeter, so the mid-size Seamaster case.
I thought the proportion looked a little different.
Yeah. And so what I think is really cool about these, not only does it have a green dial, which no other Seamaster does, but the indices are actually applied. Like I don't know if you can quite see it in that picture, but the indices are actually the lume plots are in a ring of polished metal, and on the other Seamasters of this generation, it's actually just printed on the dial.
So they were going a bit more Rolexy on this one.
Yeah, and there's actually also no helium escape valve on these, which I think is really interesting because in the normal 36 millimeter Seamaster case, there is a helium escape valve. And I think these have actually kind of held the value proposition line very well. These can still be had for under $2,000. Which for like a limited edition green dial, I mean, that's it right now. That's what everybody wants.
Be like the hottest watch in 2020?
That's what I mean, I really think so. I really genuinely think that people are missing on NeoVintage. Like people like the Hulk. I mean, the Hulk, the Kermit, the ceramic Kermit, like everybody loves green dials. Everybody's coming out with a green dial. Everybody loves limited editions. But for some reason, everybody misses on this one.
It's because it doesn't have Rolex on the dial, Max.
I think that's probably correct.
Yeah.
But Dan likes it twice as much because it says Omega. So there you go.
I do too. I think and it has tritium lume, which is really neat.
But it says Swiss made. Is that a weird thingy?
Yeah, so there aren't really any examples that have like a T insignia on them. But they are all tritium lume, which is really neat. A lot of them have aged really well too.
Cool.
The polished bezel's really cool. I like that.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so different from the other Seamasters of this era.
Yeah. That's Arthur's like scary point, I think.
Yeah, I'm like, it makes me nervous just seeing it.
And those cases wear scratches pretty hard. Speaking from experience. But I like this one a lot. This is one that I still really want to add at some point.
Yeah.
Very cool. Oh, yeah, I feel educated already. Particularly the sword hand GMT Seamaster has always caught my eye. I think that would probably be, for me, my favorite from year 3.
I think it's probably my favorite too. And I like the Jerry Lopez LE. I think that's really neat.
Dan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, why not? Okay, so let me
hold on. I have a feeling that it's going to be a watch from a brand starting with a B in here.
No,
I have a strong feeling.
There is. I've got 3 picks, but we might not get through that because we are running a bit behind. However, I've got one pick that I think you two may have not thought of at all whatsoever. So,
Cool.
without further ado, here we go. Can you see that?
Oh,
Yeah, those are cool.
that is
Yeah.
cool.
So the Zenith El Primero Rainbow Flyback 405, which is 40 mil, 12.6 millimeter thick, so it's quite thin. It's only 46.3 lug to lug, so that's very, very wearable. They range between sort of 2,500 to 4,000. That one's a little bit over, of course. The model was commissioned by Zenith for the French Air Force. They started as Super Luminova and then went to Tritium later on in the series, which
Really?
is probably like unheard of. And it's a 52-hour power reserve, and it's a flyback. So how cool is that?
That's awesome. I really, really like that pick, Dan. That is really, really neat.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were 40 millimeters.
Yeah.
I think they made some larger at some point, but I looking at it, it just looks like it's going to be a big watch. But
It
that
does.
surprised me.
Oh, it's not. I mean, if the lug to lug 46, I mean that's pretty much the same as the Speedmaster date triple dates. So it's just so wearable.
Yeah, I mean, lug to lug, it's smaller than a Pro.
Yeah.
You know, Dan, I think you've picked really well.
I'm
I'm not even going to give you a bit of crap about it.
I think you have too, Dan. I think this is really awesome. I also like that it's not from like a legacy brand that you would think of. You know, it's not Rolex, it's not Omega. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, and you know, Zenith, I think we can all agree that Zenith makes some absolutely unbelievable watches, yet they just don't seem to get the recognition.
Yeah.
And you're shocking everyone with this excellent taste, I think.
Cool.
I think you probably led off with this one for a reason.
Cool. I'll let you go next then, Arthur.
Okay. Right. Let's see what I can do here. I have two, but I think I'll go with the one that doesn't break the rules on the year that it was released. Here we go. My pick from 1998. This is the IWC Pilot UTC. So this is sort of, you know, more true to some of the simpler earlier IWC Pilots watches. Tritium dial. This particular shot doesn't show it aged that much, but I think it's a really cool way of displaying a 24-hour time, intended, of course, to be used for UTC or GMT by pilots or anyone else that can find that complication useful. It's got still some of the earlier numerals like the open 9, and the lume does start to go pretty nice and creamy at the top triangle, and I think it's only loomed at the top 3, 6, and 9 positions. But yeah, I think these, I've seen them around in the 2000s-ish range, which compared to, you know, I think there was a Spitfire, a modern Spitfire UTC that came out where they were asking, it's a limited edition, they were asking, you know, upper single digits, thousands for it. But I think this one's a cool value.
I do too. I think that's a really good comparison too with the UTC Spitfire. Cool.
Karan's saying no, Arthur, no. But maybe that was about me agreeing with you, Dan. I don't know, actually.
I think I'm with Sahaj here. What the hell is that bracelet?
Oh, it's just the pilot engineer style. I don't love them. I think they're better on straps, but yeah, it's a bit odd, isn't it?
It's a little noisy, I think, for the simplicity of the dial.
Yeah. So I get crap for potentially picking a Breitling, yet surprise, surprise comes an IWC, and everyone's like, "Yay, Arthur! Yay!"
Dan, do you want to do your other one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. Now I've got a choice of two here, and I know how much you all love this brand. So let me pick this one. Bear with me a moment. Here we go. There we go. So this is the Breitling Navitimer Mont Briant. This particular one, they did a few different sizes. This one's 38 mil. So obviously Navatimers wear quite large normally, so this is quite small for a Navitimer. 13 mil thick, 43 millimeters lug to lug. It's a vertical clutch modular chrono, Arthur, so you won't like it because of that reason. It's an ETA based 2892. 2892. It's a COSC chronometer, and the red inner scale is a percentage of minute per action, which comes from the 40s chronomats. So these range from between sort of 2,500 to 3,500. Very overlooked because obviously Breitling at that time period was coming out with Breitling for Bentley and all sorts of other monstrosities. So this is not a particular profile and size you would think to associate to the brand, and particularly a Navitimer as well. So and they do them in a few different dial colors. You've got a white, you've got a blue. I think it's lovely. I think it's stunning, actually. And if you wanted to get
like this watch.
It's lovely. If you wanted to get into the Navitimer again, but wanted something of a smaller profile, it's perfect. So
this is again.
What's that, Arthur?
What was the size again? Sorry.
38 mil.
Okay.
They do a 40 as well. So they do also, I think, 41s. There's a spaciograph as well, which I was going to pick, but I didn't, because otherwise you would all literally leave the channel and go away because there's too much Breitling talk.
So as much as I will normally shy away from Breitling, I really like this Breitling. This is one of the cooler ones.
Yeah.
I think it's
just not very well known.
I think it's a pretty good pick.
Let the record stand. Arthur says the Breitling is a pretty good pick. Dan, I think you do win.
I would have picked a 90s Cosmonaut Navitimer if I had to pick a NeoVintage Breitling, I think, with Arabic numerals. I like those a lot.
The thing is as well, though, I think that a lot of people you hear the complaints all the time that watches are too big. And there are some 90s examples like the Zenith, like that Breitling. My other pick is Speedmaster automatic day dates, or the triple dates, or Mark 40. They're such lovely sizes for people with a twiglet wrist like myself. And you've got that kind of like technical chronograph. I just think that they're so universal for lots of people. And we don't really have as much options on the modern day stuff. Would you agree?
I think that's totally correct. I mean, that's what I mean when I say it. Like, it preserves the vintage charm. Like, you have the sizes that are made for normal people, like people that aren't, gonna go buy those big Breitlings and be able to wear them. But still, you have the kind of the same modern ethos of watchmaking preserved too.
Yeah,
that's cool. Well said, because I think it sort of covers a bit of what we wanted to talk about and why NeoVintage, right?
So have you got one more pick, or
I do have one more if we're cool to share on time.
I'll just quickly share one more.
Okay.
Just very, very briefly. Here we go. So you're getting good at this now. Here we go. So I just mentioned it, the triple dates, the Mark 40s. I think these are great value. The speed reduced case, ETA 7751 or 7750. So it's a really well-known, well-used movement throughout lots of brands. They range between 1,500 to 3,500. There's lots of different dial variations of these. Probably the most well-known is the Mark 40 with the coloured dial, the one that I've got, obviously with Ben right. Clymer, he's got one. Super reliable and loads of choice. So I just think they're great.
I totally agree. I think that speedy case is awesome.
Yeah.
I like them best in the Mark 40 variant with the colors, because it just gives it more of its own character, Yeah.
Yeah. They did as well. They did tritium indices and superluminova. The tritium ones age nicely. Dial variations on the tritium ones are very slightly different, but they just have that lovely patina to them. They're stunning.
Yeah.
Dan, you're getting some praise in a very backhanded way.
I actually think that's kind of evident of NeoVintage. There's a lot of really, really great choices in NeoVintage that people pay absolutely no attention to.
Yeah.
New mic.
Thank you very much. Been very good change. Right, let's get my last pick. Breitling Bentley.
Now we're talking. Everything is back to normal. I'll do my last one quickly here. I think it's slightly breaking the rules on timing.
It is. Yeah, you should.
But I think it's good and underappreciated and should be considered. And that is the 39 millimeter Railmaster. And Fratello wrote an article on how this is underappreciated as of 2016. And they still haven't really upticked that much in value. I think they're really great watches. A friend of mine has one of these. I think he got his around 2,300, 2,400 US. And this was sort of earlier side of Omega introducing coaxials as well. Obviously, this is 2003, I believe. So it does kind of violate this. But for me, this is sort of a step in that direction without being too scary for a modern watch collector.
Thing is, as well, Arthur, though, that would have been probably 2-3 years in design. So we'll call it 2000, shall we?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
thanks.
Very
generous.
So I think it kind of highlights how much of an outsized role Omega has in like the value of NeoVintage watches. Which I think is really interesting. They really dominate that era in terms of value. You get essentially what you get from any other brand, just for thousands of dollars less.
And choice, I think, as well.
Absolutely
what's available to you. There is kind of something for everyone, really.
Yeah.
I'm actually, Arthur, I really like that pick. I think that's.
I do too. That was a really, really solid pick.
Whenever I see one of these listed at those kind of prices, I have to hold myself back, to be honest. I really like them.
It's tough with Omegas from that era because it's pretty much $2,000 for any of the coolest ones.
Yeah. I know, I've just read that.
I knew you were going to pick that
one. Cool. I know we've got a few minutes left. Have we got any questions from anyone? Any questions you would like to specifically ask Max at all? He's very knowledgeable on the subject. It's been very interesting. Thank you very much for coming on, Max. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
So sorry, carry on.
I said maybe while we wait for any questions for Max, I know you had one or two others. Is there one other pick you'd like to share? Or
yeah, if we could share that Speedmaster pick.
Oh, I don't know if I have that one up here. I'm not sure if that was in the email.
It was. I promise.
Let me check. Sorry.
It was the 381150.
Oh, I think I might have closed that one.
This isn't very nice, is it? Oh, it is a compliment, I suppose. Danny's acting very unusual today. Thoughtful, good picks, and smart.
It's quite backhanded.
Yeah.
Where did the real idiotic
really
Dan
go?
Piss off.
My email is giving me trouble, so I'm not sure we're going to be able to pull that one up. But
it's a reverse
Google search, Arthur, and just
sure. Yeah, what's the reference, Max?
381150.
Okay, let's do it.
It'll probably come up if you look up Speedy Panda Reduced, even though it's not a Panda.
I will share
this. This is when we see Arthur's all naughty tabs open here.
Family show. Is this the one? I will say my new dongle arrived since the last show, so
it is that one
topic.
Dongle.
Right.
Yeah, so this was also I think this is really neat. This is also a Japan only release, as most cooler NeoVintage Omegas were. So this has the 39 millimeter case, the reduced case, stainless steel bezel, the reverse Panda subs, which I think are really, really, really cool. Because like any Panda Speedy, like forget about it. You can't afford it. I can't afford it. it has the Valjoux 7750 modified by Omega. And I think there are a lot of iterations on the Speedmaster automatic, but this is one of my absolute favorites. And you can get them all day for like $2,000. I think it's a really, really exceptional value.
And again, same case as the triple dates. They're just they're so wearable.
They wear so well.
They do.
So
They're
well.
lovely watches.
And it has the 1479 bracelet, which is the same bracelet as the one on my Speedmaster. It's the kind of 5-link presidential style bracelet. Right.
No, that's cool. That is cool. Good final pick. We have one very important question here. Let's see. Max, do you regret? Oops, sorry, things move. Here we go. You regret the dots in your Instagram name as much as Dan and I regret our underscores.
I don't only because I feel like it preserves the integrity of DC.
Okay, but is there another DC watches on Instagram?
There are several other DC watches on Instagram.
Okay, well, so thank God for StreamYard showing your name, so you don't have to say the dots.
The thing is as well now, Arthur, though, that we're such, we're influencers that people are going to go to that effort to type our names in, aren't they? So, if
they don't follow you already, I mean, who doesn't follow you already?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be calling the shots for Scottish watches soon, aren't we, Arthur? We're going to be streaming ahead of them.
I
look very confident.
Not if you keep making good picks. It removes the entertainment, Dan. Come on.
So everyone liked the Breitling Montbrilliant then. Everyone seemed to like that.
It's a really cool pick. The 38 millimeter Breitling chronograph is a really good pick.
I think it was Arrested Time who commented that the dial of that looks like a Venn diagram of the things that we agree on. And I think your picks today fall in the overlap. So we'll just leave that there.
Cool. Well, I think we've come to the end. Thank you very much, Max, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, brilliant. Everyone check out Scottish Watches. Check out the podcast. I'm not sure what the next Scottish Watches Live on the Friday on YouTube is going to be about, but
it'll be good.
It will be good. Yeah, it will be good. Arthur, any closing comments?
No, this is a fun one. I feel educated. So, this is an example of a show that Dan and I sort of wanted to do, but there's no way we could have done ourselves because we had no clue about this, generally speaking.
Like we have a clue about everything else.
so educational.
It's the wrong one. Hang on a minute. So Rick has said, Arthur, it's official.
You have the passwords. I retire. The baton has been passed. Oh, this is dangerous. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been a really good one. And I thank you again, Max. We will see you all next week.
Sunday. Yeah, not Friday, Rick. Sunday. Get it right.
All right.
Catch you later.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye.